what should or shouldn't you invest in during your photography career? Now, in photography, there is so much equipment we can buy beyond just the camera body and the lens. There's tripods, L brackets, filters, software, you name it. But what can we get that's actually quite underrated, and what can we get that's actually overrated and we maybe shouldn't get it, if at all? Well, today let's have a bit of a discussion about that, because I've got 5 pieces of gear that I think are a bit underrated, but also 5 things that I think are a bit overrated. And let me know in the comments if you agree with me or if you think there's something I might have missed, because that's how we can all learn, is that there are some things I think you should invest in and some things I think probably don't need to spend as much money on as we currently do, and that money can be spent elsewhere. But if I have missed something, or if you think I'm wrong, let me know in the comments if you agree with me or not, because some of what I think may be underrated you may think is overrated, and vice versa, or there may be something I've completely missed that I should have brought up today. So let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you, and if you want to make sure you stay up to date with what's going on, don't forget to hit that subscribe button while you're down there as well. Let's go through the underrated ones first, because I know a lot of photographers think, where can I actually spend money that will actually help me become a better photographer, versus what have I wasted money on, because most of us don't really like to think about what we've wasted money on. I know I certainly don't. The first one I'll say, and is probably one of the most underrated items out there, is courses. When you invest in a course, someone has already taken the time to put together a lot of normally very important information to help you improve your skills in whatever that course topic is, whether it's photography, videography, growing a business, whatever. But by doing that course, you then have that small dedicated time where you have potentially all the information you might need to improve your skill set, versus doing a lot of YouTube and Google searches. I know it's ironic, someone on YouTube saying go get a course instead of do everything on YouTube. Whilst you're doing that course, you may learn new things that you didn't even know existed, such as ways to compose and take your photos, new ways to edit your photos, ways to grow your business online using social media if that's something that you're working on at the same time, because that course has been tailored for that specific topic, and they show you everything you need to know related to that topic, versus trying to search a few things on YouTube and hoping you get the information you want. You may go through a few duds before you find a few good ones, always down to what you wanted and what you got out of it as to whether it's a good course. I've gone in a few courses through places like 5-Day Deal and Skillshare. Neither of those 2 companies are sponsoring this video, although if they want to, I certainly wouldn't say no. There are so many different places you can get courses from that the best thing I can recommend is go through, see what other courses people have gone through, what their feedback on it is, and if it actually applies to what it is you're trying to do as well. Because until you go and ask someone if they like the course and why or why not, you will not know if it's a dud or not unless you're willing to buy whatever course is out there and see for yourself. But at least by doing courses, you will gain a lot more knowledge than doing lots of Google and YouTube searches, because it's that one tailored topic. Now, similar to courses is experiences. If you have to choose between going on an experience to a new location to try and get some amazing photos, or buying a new piece of equipment, go on the trip. Go for that experience, because whatever equipment it is you want to buy, that's most likely still going to be there by the time you get back, and if you need to save up for it again, you may even get a newer version out of it, whereas there is no guarantee that experience will still be there the next time you want to go. You may not have the latest gear on that trip with you. You may have to do a few workarounds to be able to get the same sort of photos that you did with the gear you were going to get. But at least you've got the experience of going somewhere new, trying new photo techniques, trying to take new pictures, seeing somewhere brand new you may have never been before and you don't know when you'll be able to go back to again, which will also increase your skills and abilities as a photographer 10 times more, well, who knows how much many times more, than a new camera would, or a new lens, or a new tripod, whatever the case may be. Because whilst you're there, you will have to force yourself to think, okay, I want to get this photo, I can't get it with the equipment I have right now. What do I have to do to get the photo with the gear I've got? So if you can go on the trip to gain those new experiences, learn those new techniques out in the field, which is sometimes the best place to learn, go on the trip, skip the gear will still be there when you get home. And because of the strength of all the software packages nowadays, well, specifically I mean Lightroom and Photoshop, because those are the ones I use, even if you weren't able to get the latest gear and you had to do something like cropping massively into a photo and then blow it up to make it a decent size so you can print it, you are able to do that now, because thanks to their super resolution and enhanced abilities, you can crop into a photo, explode it to a much larger size, and then print it at the size you need with minimal loss in quality compared to if you didn't have to crop that photo because you had that new piece of equipment you were looking for. So if you have to choose between the trip and a new piece of gear when you've already got some gear, go on the trip, get the gear when you get back. If you have to save up for it, there might be a new version coming out and then you can just wait for the new version anyway. So it's a win-win. You get much more going on the trip than you do just buying the new gear. There's only one time I'd say choose the gear over the trip, and that is you need that piece of gear to do an upcoming job that's going to earn you revenue so you can go on the trip. Because you're buying that gear and you're getting paid for using the gear, that can then go towards the trip. That is the only time I would say choose gear over the experience, which is when you're actually getting paid for the gear that you're about to buy. Otherwise, go for the experience. Now, this is possibly the only piece of gear I'll mention that's underrated, and that is your trusty tripod. Trust me, take this from someone who's actually on their 4th tripod in about 5 years. I know how underrated they are, and not just from myself, but speaking to other photographers as well. And that's because when you first get it, you're like, I'm not too sure how much I'll use it. It's an extra thing to bring. It's an extra couple kilos, whatever the case may be. And then you use it and you find you actually like using it. And then you end up going and buying a better tripod. But at the same time, you should get the best tripod you can afford right off the bat. Don't get a medium quality one or a low quality one because it's cheaper. You need to get a tripod that's sturdy, that's not going to rattle about a little bit in the wind, because then you will never get a good photo out of it and then you will stop using the tripod. You need a tripod that when you put it there, it's not moving and it can handle the weight of whatever gear it is you've got. Granted, with my setup, it's not too heavy. Most tripods should be able to comfortably handle this. I mean, my GorillaPod could actually handle the weight of my camera and lens. But I know that when I'm out taking photos and the ground's unstable or whatever the case may be, I bring the best tripod I've got because I know when I set it up, it's not moving. No, the wind will not make it move. I've actually had a tripod get knocked over by a strong gust of wind. That was a heart attack and a half. So if you can, get the best tripod you can afford right from the get-go once you know you will actually use it quite consistently. Which, if you take photos and videos the way I do, you will need a very good tripod, otherwise you're just not going to be able to make any quality images or videos. Now, depending on the type of photography you do, this one may or may not be applicable to you, and that is an editing tablet. I've got the Wacom Intuos medium-sized one, I think it is, and I can't speak highly enough of it because of the control it gives me when I'm editing my photos in Photoshop or even in Lightroom now with their new masking feature. Because I get much more control and accuracy using that compared to a mouse, it has saved me countless of hours over the years that I've used it. I do know some photographers who, portrait and wedding photographers, who have found no use for it whatsoever, and that's perfectly fine. That's why I said this is a discussion. But I found that when you want that control and you're needing to do separation of exposures and masking and all the little details that come into it, having that editing tablet has saved hours, and I cannot recommend it highly enough. If you do landscape and cityscape photography, get an editing tablet and just save yourself the time and the hassle of trying to control everything with a mouse. It's just a lot easier. This one is a little bit two-part, but I'm going to lump it under one, and that is filters. And the first filter you should always have in your bag is a circular polarizer, because the strength of it, where it is able to cut through the water that you want to cut through it, remove the reflections of buildings or any reflective surfaces, remove the glare from lights and the sun, is nigh on impossible to replicate in post. That if you were just to get one circular polarizer for the largest lens you have and then get the necessary step down rings, will save you so much time, and you'll be much happier because of the photos you're able to walk away from by using it. You don't have to use it on every photo, but when you do want to use it, you'll be very happy that you have it in your bag, because then you can get the photos you wanted versus trying to fix it in post and probably not getting it and then having to bin it completely and being unhappy because you don't have the picture you want. There's two things to bear in mind with polarizers is get the one for the largest lens you've got and then get step down rings. That way you don't have to buy one filter per lens unless you want to, because you don't want to swap them out. That's completely up to you. But make sure you get one that doesn't affect the colors in your photos though, because some polarizers do, like they will drastically change the hues of the greens and the reds and the blues. Some do not. I use the NISI system because I've been using them for a few years, and I cannot complain because the colors that I see are the colors that come out in the image, unless I myself have tweaked them later on in Lightroom or Photoshop. And the other filters are neutral density filters, or ND filters. These are just dark pieces of glass that sit in front of your lens to force your camera to do a long exposure or a more wide open aperture if that's what you want it to do, instead of a stop down aperture depending on the depth of field you'd like to get. You can get them in a range of stops. I've got a 3 stop and a 10 stop here. If you see the difference just holding them up, you see the 3 stop, you can still see through it, but the 10 stop is nearly pitch black. Depending on the current lighting conditions you're shooting in, you may even need to go into bulb mode and set the time manually to be able to get the exposure you want. I've actually used this filter to get a 20-minute exposure when I was in Phuket because I just wanted to give it a go and see how it was. The good thing is, if you use some apps like Nisi's app or Photo Pills, you put in what your current exposure, well, normally your shutter speed, how many stops you want to add to it based on the ND filter that you're using, and then it'll tell you exactly what your next shutter speed is going to be, whether like you go from 1/100th of a second up to 20 seconds as an example, depending on what it is you're using. So using an ND filter, it provides you with a lot more creativity than if you didn't have one. That's the underrated stuff. And what do you think? Am I really way off the mark, or are there some really crucial items I should have included that are underrated? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. And if you could do me a favor, give this video a thumbs up if you liked it so far, because that does greatly help our channel out as well. But what's overrated though? And I'm deliberately going to start with a controversial one here, and that's presets. Now, look, I'm not hating on presets. I think they're an amazing tool that have their place. What I think the error is that a lot of people sell presets and say, this is a one and done product. As in, you've taken your photo, you've added a preset, and that's it. But that's not how presets should be used. Use presets as a starting point. Say, this is the sort of look I want to go for my image, and then make the tweaks you want to make to it thereafter. Thankfully, Lightroom now has options where you can change the strength of the preset, make it weaker or stronger depending on the look you're going for. Not only that, but once you've made the same tweaks many times over to a particular preset, you can even save it as a new preset to use moving forward, so you don't have to keep making those same tweaks all over again. It's one of the great things about Lightroom. Use a preset, modify it, save it as a new one. That way you don't have to keep choosing it and modifying it. Lots of people sell presets, and I'm not hating on them. Everyone I know who does, they're doing it as part of their business, and they need to find revenue streams to keep the business afloat. And selling presets is one of the ways they can do that. And full credit to them. I don't use presets too often, so it's not something I probably would do in the near future. But if I do find myself doing the same changes to a photo, then yes, maybe I may sell presets down the line. We just have to wait and see. Before you go and buy all the presets that are out there, even just try creating your own. If you know you're making the same sort of changes to the same photos all the time, make a preset out of it. With Lightroom, it's not too hard to do that. And then, like I mentioned though, use it as a starting point. Apply that preset, make the changes you want to make, and then see how it goes from there. But never ever look at a preset and think, I've applied it, it's done, thank you and goodbye, because you may not walk away with the best photo you can if you use the mentality of, it's got a preset, now I'm done. That's the first step in your editing process. Apply the preset and then finish editing it afterwards. This one is a little bit of a use case one, similar to the editing tablet, and that's color calibrating for monitors. You should only really worry about color calibrating your monitor if you print out your images for sale or for commercial work. However, if your images are mostly going to be on social media or just sitting on your computer, then no, don't worry about calibrating your monitors, because to try and get the same color accuracy across all those devices is impossible. Even just the way my photos look on my phone versus an iPhone are completely different. And they're also different to how they look on my iPad, to how they look on my monitors, and even my friends' monitors, my family's monitors. You get the idea. Unless you're printing out your photos for sale or you need them for commercial work where the color accuracy for branding purposes has to be accurate, don't worry about calibrating your monitor, because it's something that you'll do once, probably never do again, and then your color calibrator is going to sit there collecting dust and you'll wonder why you ever got it to begin with. Earlier I did mention that circular polarizers and neutral density filters are underrated and should be used more often, but there are filters I do think that are overrated, and that is a graduated filter. Now, if you look at these filters, you can see here at the top it's very dark, and because this is a soft graduated filter, it gradually gets softer and softer and softer to the point where you get to the bottom and there's no graduation at all anymore. But unless you're using an almost perfectly flat separation, normally like the sea, these will often be more of a hindrance than a benefit, because something will always crop into that graduated part. I found a better workaround is to take 2 exposures, one for the sky, one for the foreground, and then blend them together later on in Photoshop. Granted, it is a little bit of editing to do so, but you have much more control over how the image is going to be, because if you just put this in front of your camera and a little bit crops into the graduated part, you will then have to fix that later on in post, and it becomes a much bigger nightmare than just trying to blend 2 exposures together. Should you get graduated filters? I normally don't advise it. I know photographers who love them and swear by them, but I do think that because unless you've got that perfectly flat horizon or a flat separation between the two, I would just avoid it and do 2 exposures instead. It's just a lot easier for me on the computer to do so. For a bit more controversy, the latest camera body. Do you actually need to buy the latest body whenever they comes out? Well, yes and no, because again, it depends on your use case. Unless there is something specific on that camera body that you absolutely need to continue doing the job you're doing or improve at the job you're doing, most of the time you are not going to walk away with that much incremental benefit out of buying the new camera body, except you have the new camera body. Prime example is if you were a landscape photographer and you upgraded from the Z6 to the Z6 II from Nikon, you would not get that much difference between them. However, if you were a sports photographer and you upgraded from whatever you've got to the Nikon Z9, then yes, that is a huge difference where the latest camera gear may come in handy. But again, it depends on the type of photography you do. But if you do something like landscape, cityscape, street photography, upgrading from something like the Sony a7 III to the a7 IV, unless you're doing lots of prints, may not be that beneficial. And instead of buying that new camera body, you can do that underrated item I mentioned earlier, which was experiences. Instead of buying the a7 IV, go on a trip first, and then save up and get the a7 IV afterwards. Because unless that new camera body has that one specific new feature that will benefit you in your particular job, most of the times you may not get that much benefit out of it. Prime example, if I stayed with Canon, I would only upgrade to the R5 because the R6 has a drop in megapixels, as is even the R3. I need something with high megapixels so I can print large photos when I want to, or crop in and print large photos when I want to, versus start off smaller and have a harder time increasing the photo size. So do you always need the latest camera body? No, unless there's something specific for your job. And last but not least, and thank you for sticking around this long as well, I should say, is camera bags. Camera bags are a dime a dozen. There are hundreds to choose from. It's often mind-boggling to think, which one should I get, because there's such a vast difference in sizes, prices, quality, all of it, that you don't know what to get. You can get small ones like my Peak Design one here, which I actually just use as a day bag, but it's designed to carry camera and I could even put a lens and other stuff in it. Or you can get bigger camera bags that you can take hiking with you, but do you actually need to bring all your gear with you? Most of the time, no, you don't. I mean, I downgraded to this bag because when I go to take photos in the streets here in Bangkok, this is all I need. I don't need to bring my 2 cameras, 3 lenses, GoPro, 50 million tripods, you name it. I just bring what's needed. And even if you're driving to a location and you have all your gear with you, don't leave anything unattended in the car. Chances are someone's going to see that gear, break in, nick it, and even if you've got insurance, you're still losing out on that piece of gear because you may, well, even though it may get replaced, you're still without it until it does get replaced, if the insurance does replace it. And do you actually need a really big camera bag? Only if you're going hiking, but in that case, I'd say get a hiking bag and then a camera bag insert, which you can then put in your hiking bag, because that way you've got a bag designed for hiking, but all the camera gear you need with you to go on that hike. Don't bring all the gear with you as well, otherwise you're walking around with a 30 kilo pack, which, unless you want to, I mean, if you want to, go for it, but it's not something I'd recommend for someone going for long walks. Bring the gear you need, leave the rest at home or in your studio, whatever the case may be, but don't leave it unattended in the car unless you want it to get broken into and stolen. So, what do you think? Have I been right in what I said is underrated and overrated? Am I completely wrong? Are there items I've missed out? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. And if you have liked this video, please do give it a thumbs up. That will be greatly appreciated. And if you want to stay up to date to see what's coming up next, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and tick that little bell. That way you get a notification whenever a new video is released. I'll leave it there for now, and I'll see you on the next one. Have a good one. Blah, 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 blah. But at the same time, what should or shouldn't you invest in your photography career? Let's go through the underrated. Did invest in an editing tablet? But what can we get that's actually